I'm interested to know what people have done to transform themselves in a time of so much change.
Mm,
Um, I've seen it by way of us, and
mhm.
be it this podcast, but also just supporting clients remotely.
You're right. Like just as recently as the beginning of this week, someone asked me that, like, well, how are you managing this world previously when you always were on site but doing the Gemba walks?
Hey, how's it going, man?
Yes, Shawn, how you been, man? How you been?
Doing good, brother. All right, cool. So I'm happy to catch you before the end of 2020 to do
Yeah.
another one of our podcasts here. I thought it was a good time to reflect on the year and answer some of the questions that we've been getting from the community at large. And I know you've been getting some really thoughtful questions too. So we thought we'd put it down on the mic and share our thoughts and feedback with everybody.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I get those questions throughout the year, and just this, what's today? Today's Friday when we're recording this, so I got a few questions on the Monday and a few questions on the Wednesday, and it's always a similar pattern. So, it'd be good for us to, close the year by answering some of those questions, almost like an AMA, but the year of the AMA, I guess, right? Just ask us anything, and and we can talk about the most common questions we're getting, not day to day, but quite frequently throughout the year.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. So how about you start? What was so we'll start maybe with the first big question that comes to mind relating to transformation and what people have been asking you about.
Yeah, so I guess because and the business that we're in, we're constantly meeting new clients and talking to existing and new and friends and networking. I would think this is the year of networking. A common question I got was, well, how did you get into consulting? Specifically, how did you specialize in doing digital transformation? So I get that quite frequently. As recent as Wednesday, someone was asking me that, like, tell me the background. How did you stumble into this? And I probably use that word loosely, but it is almost stumbling into this craft.
Cool. Well, I'll tell my story too,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
we'll jump back to your story. So I've been in. I started off with a technology background, but I've specialized in records and information management, and with technology and records and information, um, having information electronic was just a natural progression. So I've spent the past 20 years not only implementing ways to manage information electronically or repositories, but also the processes, the culture, the technology, and also the data governance that surrounds that. Fast forward many years of doing transformation in government, oil and gas, banking, retail. Um, it just what I realized is how much I love to help organizations digitally transform. And a few years ago, I said, I just don't want to do it with one company anymore, but I want to share everything that I've learned and all the mentorship that I've had and try it as a known separate business. And so that I can help as many companies as I can. And it's been an amazing, invaluable 3 years. I've learned a lot about myself in helping other companies digitally transform. So,
Yeah, yeah, well said. Like we have some similarities there. Certainly, the backgrounds that you mentioned, I had some of that experience as well. I came up through the financial sector, so when I was trained as a Six Sigma Lean black belt, I got my training through the financial component. So they were really big on Six Sigma, of course, the quality to ensure that there isn't any errors that's going to lead to some financial issues on their end. But then I migrated into the healthcare sector, and in doing that, that is when I really started taking a part in a lot of solutions that were trying to digitize the healthcare sector, right? So, as you can imagine, paper and medical records is still a very analog concept, and so a lot of my projects was working on how do we digitize that. So I I really gravitated into that world, which is, I think, a harder task to take on, which is trying to get an organization that was primarily analog to be more digital. So that whole digital transformation really took to me well. And very similar to what you mentioned was mentors. So I've been very blessed to have some mentors from all the various sectors I've been in, from the finance to healthcare to retail, grocery, logistics. I've had mentors that either they were consultants before, or like when I was when they were mentoring me, or they were colleagues and they became consultants. And so there's so many individuals I can mention, but my closest mentors is one of them is my brother-in-law, Mark, who's been a consultant for some time. And he was always telling me, what are you waiting for? Why don't you take advantage of making some significant changes? So in the area that you're in before, you're making changes in a minute area, like in a smaller scale, if that makes sense, right? It doesn't mean it's less significant, but I was fixated in maybe one area because of my role. But going into consultancy allowed me to make changes on a vast scale, with multiple different clients. And yeah, so that's sort of how I got into that as well. Encouragement from my mentorship and just the experience I've got that you mentioned, where we were changing companies that were traditionally analog into a more digital framework.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely some similarities. And yeah, can't say enough about the power of just having mentors in there,
Yeah.
support us and show us a vision and help us shape our own vision. So
Yeah. They boost you. I mean, I don't think I would have made those leaps without them, right? Like, I remember even being requested to do 6 Lean training. I declined. I said, no, I'm an analyst. I sit in front of the computer. I'm not an individual that can facilitate and have these grand scale ideas. And as my mentor saying, no, that's a challenge. You go over the challenge and you can overcome it. And I'm so glad I listened to that. That also my wife too. My wife's like, no, you go for that.
absolutely. Hey, I got a question for you. Um,
Yeah.
something that I was asked not too long ago. What's the biggest learning you have coming out of this year, out of 2020?
Oh man, that's a good question. So, I think a paradigm that I normally had was shattered. So, for those you and I 6 gurus, and the walk the Gemba concept, that paradigm was shattered when we were no longer able to walk the Gemba, no longer able to visit and see activities firsthand. So, a good thing for technology. There was one project I was on where I had to be on site in order to design the process, facilitate what a new process looked like with all the stakeholders, and then roll out the process. And I had to do that all remotely. So to answer your question, that was one aspect that was a significant change that I had to adapt to, which is it can still be done. I mean, it can still be understanding what the very detailed process of this project that I was working on, but it would have to be using creative means. Meaning, I would not. I would change my schedule to support the time that one individual is available, so that they can take the camera and walk the floors with me and show me what the process is. So normally I'd be on site and I can just use my schedule. And so if I'm visiting and the operation hours is 9 to 5, then I can walk the floors 9 to 5. But the individual that's part of the stakeholder is not available till 6 to midnight or midnight to 2 o'clock in the morning. Hey, well then I had to be available. And I was very, yeah, right, and very fortunate that technology helped pave the way. That even goes as far as this, you and I having this conversation. This is how I had to facilitate brainstorm sessions. This is how I had to do process mapping, using some tools that I normally use. I'm getting into the weeds here, but I normally use like Microsoft Visio, but I had to use some other tools like Mura and Muro, process flows that they can sign it and see me move the sticky notes all around, like so virtual sticky notes, and they themselves can move it around as well. So thank goodness for technology to help us over that hurdle. But yeah, that paradigm was shattered, but certainly that was one of the biggest change where I had to adjust and adapt, and the project was successful, so it actually ended up working, but thank goodness for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Yes, the first thing that came to mind for me was just really the power of being resilient, and kind of this is the biggest global change that I've experienced in my lifetime. I hope it's the last, but it's definitely been a great learning experience. So from a business standpoint, a lot of the relationships I built and exciting work starting up or in progress for roughly the spring of this year, the second quarter, and over the summer, a lot of it just retracted, and I was left
Right.
kind of like, oh my gosh, where did everything go? And naturally, because of the pandemic, it just people pulled back from doing business, just trying to either stabilize or if they can even continue to operate. Um, but then coming into the fall time and now closing out the end of the year, I'm seeing people and organizations adjust or have adjusted or are making the decision to adjust. They've found a
Yes.
way to continue business, but in this new way of working, be it working
Hmm.
remotely, working online, collaborating, and also significant changes in the way that their company operates. So, reduction of paper and moving culture to an online capacity. Um, so I'm fortunate to be ending the year helping multiple organizations through this aha moment and be resilient and transform themselves. But as a business owner myself, as well as supporting other businesses, um, that collective dip when the pandemic caused us to kind of retract, and the resurgence that's coming in the end of the year is definitely a lot of gut check moments that I've experienced this year. But I feel strong about where my business is and where it's going. But also, I feel super elated and excited and happy and fortunate to be working with companies also of this mindset. We're going to transform. We're going to be resilient. We're going to look at this over the long term and rethink how we do business. So,
Yeah, well said. Certainly, I've experienced the pullback as well. And initially, I was like, oh my gosh, everything is sort of, like you mentioned, sort of pulling back and collapsing. They're making decisions on what they're going to go forward with. But on the other end, I saw demand in other avenues. So that companies that are want to be resilient, or companies that want to explore innovative solutions that was probably on their books prior, but just wasn't as the top of mind. Now, of course, in the scenario that we're in now, it has been. I met a lot of individuals that have that mindset now. So, the most craziest idea that we had, Shawn, back in the day, that was probably thinking it was too forward thinking, is not so radical anymore. Now, these concepts and these ideas absolutely make sense. And not only does it make sense, they're asking, well, can you accelerate this? Can you do this really, really fast? So yes, there is definitely a pullback, but I've also seen that demand elsewhere. And I've also say that, thank you for you even suggesting this channel. I know you've mentioned this before to me. I think it was a year ago, and I was on board. I was like, yeah, let's do it, but we never got off the ground. And I think because of this, it made sense to do that now. Like, what are we waiting for? Let's get started. And so I want to I want to reiterate thanks to you, but I also want to reiterate that I've experienced more and more people that have a need for this type of channel, or are asking me different kind of support questions. And I find that it's amazing. It actually feels good because you're meeting like-minded people that are resilient, if I use your words, that actually want to get to the next hurdle, and that energizes me. And certainly, they're giving me new ideas I haven't considered as well, like yourself.
right on, man.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. And for the last
Mhm.
question that's been coming up quite a bit uh, for me is what can people do? What can they expect going into 2021? Do we have any advice or suggestions, recommendations that we can provide for next?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it might be redundant. Some people have heard me say this before. I think it's more prudent even now, but I think now's the time to start doing two things. One, start tapping in some, I guess, ideas that you've always had in the back of your head, and you think, oh, maybe now's not the time. I think now is the time to, whether that's explore something personal for yourself or to apply to something towards your work. Um, and the reason why I say that is some people have asked me that they're now been thrusted and put into a position at work where they're now expected to be the expert or on how to put a strategy together, how to fix their current scenario, how to lead a project, how to engage others and get ideas, right? So I would say, those ideas that you've always had and maybe were afraid to say it or not been able to share it, now's your time. That's one. And two, I would say now's the time also to learn something new, right? So I'm a big believer of continuously improving as a mindset so myself. So I'm always studying, I'm always learning some new concepts. Doing this podcast and YouTube video is brand new to me. I took it upon this year after you asked me, hey, let's connect. I went into this full force, and you know, Shawn, that I'm in this to win it. I'm really engaged in this concept, and I enjoyed learning something new and putting myself out there trying to learn this new concept. So to try to learn something new.
Well said, well said. Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. This year has been a lot of self-reflection and learning. Um, for me, in terms of moving into next year, and two things come to mind. The first one is to pay yourself first, and not exclusively from the financial standpoint, be it, pay yourself in your freedom fund and then everything else. But pay yourself first, kind of to echo what you're saying, Carl. Be it with a new hobby, with new exercise, spiritual development, educational development. Pay yourself first because it pays those dividends later on, and it just enables you to find a future that really serves your person or your core. This year I took up yoga. I'm still working on my downward dog and one-handed sit and stuff, but
Awesome, awesome.
after a year of doing it, I mean, I've trained martial arts for a year, I've lifted weights for years, but yoga's been by far the most holistically engaging exercise that I've done, and mentally for my whole body. So um,
Yeah.
paying myself first is definitely one thing that I'm looking into new year to continue doing. The
Mm.
second thing that comes to mind, this time period and us being isolated physically from each other, it's allowed me to appreciate each day more.
Mm.
Appreciate my time with my family, just communicating remotely with my parents or having my child communicate with his grandparents. um,
Mm.
Even like my wife turned 40 this year, and I held a surprise party, so we made a cake for her. And then I said, oh, we're getting a phone call, but she didn't realize it was a Zoom call where all of her friends and family were surprising her at 6 at night, just as we're about to cut to this cake. They're like, surprise.
Oh,
And
that's awesome.
it was a precious moment because she thought, being 40, I'm going to be here doing it just us and not everybody. And so
Yes,
it
yes.
became a really, really nice experience. I reached out to friends this year that I haven't talked to in years. Um,
Great.
just as I reflect on the year, the ability to savor and appreciate every single moment at a much deeper level um, has really come through to me this year. And
Mm.
that's definitely my couple of my takeaways going into 2021.
Well, that makes sense, man. I'm glad we were able to at least bestow some of the answers that were the most common questions that we're getting.
What is it? AMA? Is it? That's what it's called,
AMA.
right? AMA.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good, man.
All right, cool, man. Well, you have a fantastic weekend, and to all you folks, I wish you well. All the best for 2021. Let's get it. And yeah, we'll stay tuned for our next video, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
All right, man. Peace.
All
Thanks a
right,
lot, Shawn.
take care. All right.
All right, peace.